Welcome back, folks. We're going to start our formal program real soon. There will be more time for mingling and talking with each other, having food and anything else you want after this. But we'd like to take a few minutes to gather. And I'm going to ask everybody to come forward and find some place to sit. And we will want, that's partly because you're going to be here for about 30 minutes, so you'll want a place to sit. But it's not the only reason. So please come find a place to sit. Anybody? Folks who are standing at the League of Women Voters table, would you be willing to come sit? People who are standing in the back in the middle of things, would you be willing to come sit? We're going to start the formal program real soon, and it'll work better if people are sitting. And as I said earlier, there will be more time for conversation and mingling and all of that later. But this is a multi-stage event, and now is the stage for gathering together as one big group and feeling ourselves together. I'm looking for Marta. There, great, fabulous. So I'd like to, again, for those who don't know who I am, I'm Lori Kenshaft. I'm the coordinator of the Mass Incarceration Working Group of the First Parish Unitarian Universalist of Arlington. And I want to welcome all of you here today. We're going to hear just a few brief words from the minister of this congregation, Reverend Marta Morris Flanagan. And then we will be honoring some people, and honoring, I hope, everybody, and then hearing from Rasan Hall about what a difference a DA makes. And with that, thank you very much for speaking.
Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to host this event and mark this birthday, this anniversary of efforts to make a difference in criminal justice reform. I am privileged to serve as minister of this wonderfully vital congregation, and it falls to me to offer a blessing. To bless something is to simply acknowledge the good and the holy that is present in that person, that occasion, that thing. So hear this blessing. Blessing to those gathered here today. Blessing to those who have never seen this room before. Blessing to those who come to this house of meeting regularly. Blessings to those who come as familiar and welcome guests to this home. Blessings to those who cannot be here today, but who are here in spirit. Blessings to those who have lived behind walls for days, for months, for years. Blessings to those who love someone behind walls. Blessings to those whose hearts and spirits are broken. Blessings to those who are rising up. Blessings to those who are new to this work of justice and compassion. Blessings to those who have made a career of this work. Blessings to those who have tumbled into this movement through a painful turn of fate. Blessings to those who turned willingly to it because their hearts were opened. Blessings to those who travel near and far to speak about justice. week in and week out. Blessings to those who gather in the streets, carrying signs, demanding attention. Blessings to those who volunteer behind prison walls. Blessings to those who try to do their paid work in a better way. Blessings to those who write better laws and create better policies. Blessings to those who show up at the State House again and again and again. Blessings to those who organize meetings, to those who attend meetings, to those who share their own stories, and blessings to those who listen to the stories of others. Blessings to those who dream big dreams. Blessings to those who help people in small ways, this day, yesterday, and the next day. Blessings to every person, near and far, who helps to heal our broken world. Blessings to you, each and all. Now, this is when Lori expects me to give her the mic. I have it. Before we begin this time of recognizing people from all walks of life who have been working so diligently to reform criminal justice in Massachusetts, it's important that we note the contributions that Lori Kenshaft has made. In the winter of 2013, that's 5 years ago, Lori was one of the founders of the Mass Incarceration Working Group here at First Parish. Lori has been the primary leader of the working group for the last 5 years, and in that capacity, she's planned and facilitated those meetings. She has managed the working group email list of over 600 names. Using the list, she has reached out to all Unitarian Universalist congregations in the Commonwealth. And those of us who have been blessed to receive Lori's emails know how thorough she can be. Lori has joined with working group members to organize films, panels, and discussion groups. And these events have been attended by members of this congregation, but also by the wider community. In 2016, she was involved in coordinating programs on restorative justice here at First Parish. She was a primary organizer and then an on-site leader for 2 forums. Some of you were there. The first in March of 2015 was called The Roadmap Toward Justice. The second, held in March 2017, was aptly named The Legislative Forum. Politics of Justice. She has networked with leaders from ex-prisoners organized for collective action, Jobs Not Jails, the Center for Teen Empowerment, just a second, the Criminal Justice Working Group, the ACLU, and Black Lives Matter, to mention just a few. She has collaborated with legislators, including Will Brownsberger, Jamie Eldridge, Cindy Friedman, and the late Senator Ken Donnelly, Sean Garbely, and Dave Rogers. And most, if not all of you, are here. Most recently, Lori did extensive research on legislative proposals from the State Senate and State House of Representatives, which are pending in a conference committee. Did I get that right? This afternoon, a certificate is being presented to Lori. The certificate reads, "This proclamation is delivered by End Mass Incarceration Together, a task force of Unitarian Universalist Mass Action and the First Parish of Arlington, Massachusetts Incarceration Working Group, to recognize, to honor, and to thank Lori Kenshaft for your incredible organizing, networking, research, leadership, and countless actions on behalf of people who are incarcerated, their families, the communities, and the Commonwealth. Thank you, Lori. Now you can have the mic.
I told her she had to keep it to 2 minutes. I guess that didn't work. Thank you so much, Marta. And thank you so much, Bill and Susan, and everybody else who's here and who has contributed, who isn't here, who's here in spirit, and here who would be in spirit. So I really do believe that this movement, which it can be called as to end mass incarceration, but it's really for a better way of doing things. It's for justice, for compassion, for equity, for effectiveness, for a peaceful way of being with each other. It's for a lot of things, and all of us are part of it, I think. So for those who are able and willing, I would like to ask, and there's going to be a number of these, so it's going to be, when you're able and willing, please stand. If that's not comfortable for you, raise a hand wide. But I would like to have everybody who feels like they have contributed to this work for justice and compassion ever in any way, and I would say coming here counts, so this one's easy. Please stand up. Thank you. Thank you for being part of this work. We're not going to be able to applaud after all of these. Stay standing, stay standing. We're not going to be able to applaud after all of these, so hold off your applaud to the end, but stay standing unless, well, I will say stay standing if you've been doing this work for more than 2 years. If you've been part of this work to create a just and compassionate criminal justice system in any way, any sort of contribution, please stay standing. Thank you. Anybody who's been part of this work for at least 4 or 5 years, stay standing. You folks are amazing. Anybody who's been part of this work for at least 9, 10, 11 years, stay standing. You folks deserve the applause. Thank you. Now everybody can sit. Thank you. I'm not going to ask you about 20 and more. And I'd like to honor some particular people who have been made a huge difference. First of all is Senator Will Brownsberger. And when your name is called, please stand up, although some of you are still standing, and somebody will bring you a gift that is from the Mass Incarceration Working Group. Senator Will Brownsberger, as many of you know, is co-chair of the Judiciary Committee and has therefore been enormously involved in this work. But it goes much further back than that. He has been both a prosecutor and a defense attorney. He has brought to the legislature a way of reflecting that is deeply moral. I've heard the moral passion in his work for so long. He also brings a sort of, I call it technocratic rigor. He wants to get it right. It's important that it be right both morally and that it will work. And I so appreciate that combination that you bring to this work. So thank you from all my heart for what you are doing in the legislature. Thank you. Next person I'd like to recognize is my own state representative, Sean Garbely. He told me recently he's going to have a 10th anniversary celebration coming up, and I'm like, wait a second, how'd that happen? Sean has been deeply involved in this work, particularly around restorative justice and medical release, but not just that. And he and I don't know how many conversations we have had. I will never forget the day that we were anxiously waiting to see the House bill, omnibus version of the omnibus bill is going to come out, and we're wondering what's in it, and some people think it's going to be tiny, and some people think it's going to be big, and we really don't know, and it's middle of the day, and I get this ring at my doorbell, and it's Sean standing at my door, having printed out the entire bill on a sheaf of paper and handing it to me, hand-delivering the House omnibus bill. That is constituent service. Thank you. And Representative Dave Rogers, who I believe represents the ground on which we are standing, although not a building that's a religious institution, has been involved in all of this work at a very high level. You've covered so many different bases, some of the things that are in the omnibus bill and some of the things that are not. Marijuana legalization, you filed the bill 3 years ago. The citizens of Massachusetts took that one away from you. You filed around parole. We're still going to have to get to that one. But you've done a lot of different things. And you've also been remarkable at your desire to help people understand how the legislative process works. I've seen you in conversation after conversation with people going as deep into the details as people want and clearly encouraging a level of citizen engagement that not everybody has the generosity of heart and the sense of time that you give to people. So thank you so much, both for your work for criminal justice reform and for everything you do to encourage citizen engagement in this process. Thank you. Senator Cindy Friedman. Been doing this work for better part of a decade, although senator for much less time. We often talk about jobs, not jails, and the importance of work, not locking people up and all the implications that has. What Cindy works on is creating, and from my point of view, is the infrastructure that allows a healthy economy and healthy people. That's everything from transportation, housing, training for those middle skill jobs that don't necessarily require a bachelor's degree or advanced degrees, but high school and beyond, creating an economy in which everybody has a place. You've also had a special interest in mental health issues, behavioral health issues, substance abuse issues is clearly a huge issue for many of us. You work to create the sort of society in which people flourish. You've had this particular interest in pretrial reform, but I also see you as so much lifting up jobs, but it's not just jobs. It's a society in which everybody has a chance to flourish. Thank you. Senator Jamie Eldridge comes from Marlborough, Ayr, places like that. Doesn't necessarily seem like an obvious person to have here in Arlington. You have been involved in so many aspects of this work. For our group, we're doing this combination today of honoring people who have a special relationship with our group and a special relationship with the larger movement. For our group, you helped so much in the early years. One of your constituents was a member of our group for the first few years, and you gave us, through her, so much wise advice. And so much, how do you get the lay of this land? You really helped us. You are also, as many people have said, the most progressive member of the legislature. I recently saw you flinch when somebody said to say just one of the most progressive members of the legislature. I would love you to have lots of company. You also have a big vision of what it takes to create a society in which people flourish. You've worked particularly on restorative justice and many other aspects of the omnibus bill, but you're also holding up a vision of society that is kind, that is effective, that is inclusive, that is embracing, that makes this a good place for everybody to live. And for that, I so thank you. And would you put your hat on, Susan? Because I have to introduce his constituent next. This is Susan Tordella, also known as the Justice Jackal or the Carceral Monster. She goes to the State House dressed like this, and she gets legislators' attention. She has done so much to get legislators' attention. She has done so much to change. She's in the prison, she's doing Toastmasters, she's holding events at her home, she's catering events at the State House, not fancy catering, but food makes people come, with a team. But she has done so much over the last 5 years to lift up these issues, and in particular to get this group started, but also just so many different ways, and I know I don't know all of what you're doing. So I want to thank you, and yes, in that outfit, you're hard to ignore. And I'm going to ask a question that I'm curious what it would look like in a different room, but in this room, could you stand up or lift your hand high if you've ever spoken with a legislator? Okay. This makes this a very unusual crowd. So thank you to everybody who's been part of those conversations around the laws. Cassandra Ben-Sahi, you're next. Would you stand up? Cassandra, I first met you, was it 3-4 years ago when Epica had its 10th anniversary celebration in this room. I've heard you speak so many times since then. You are a powerful and eloquent leader. Like the best of preachers, you use your personal story to touch people, but not so much because it's about you. You touch people use your personal story to touch people and get us to understand things more deeply, more broadly, to feel things more deeply, more broadly. You are a leader in so many ways, and you bring this heart and spirit to this work that is very true and shines. So I want to thank you so much for all you've done and for who you are. You are precious. And now I'd like anybody, and feel free to pass on this one if you don't feel comfortable with it, but if you have been incarcerated for any length of time, or if you have loved somebody who is incarcerated or has been incarcerated now or in the past, if you yourself or someone you love has spent time behind walls, feel free to raise your hand or not as you feel comfortable. That's a lot of us, and a lot of us not. And I want to say thank you to all and everybody who's taking that personal pain and turning it into something constructive. I honor, especially honor, anybody here who has been incarcerated or has been hurt in that way because a loved one is incarcerated. I just need to honor that experience. Thank you. Barbara Dugan. Barb, hi. Barbara Dugan used to be with Families Against Mandatory Minimums. Yes, I know. Families Against Mandatory Minimums. and is now with CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations of Massachusetts. All the way through this, before and after, Barbara is a civil rights attorney. Barb is somebody who brings her legal mind to this work of making justice. You have done so many things. You've carried around little sugar packets and told people, this is what this many ounces look like. You've written legal briefs. You told me recently, or your organization told me recently, I'm not sure it was you in particular, that in this state recently, 1 Muslim a day comes to CARE for assistance with some incident on average. You are bringing your legal training to this work of making justice. You also, in terms of special relationship with our group, happen to live here in Arlington, and for 2 or 3 years, I really saw you as my political mentor. When I wasn't sure what to do, you were the person I went to. When I needed to understand something, when I didn't understand what something meant, when this term didn't make any sense to me, I came to you. When I was trying to make a decision and I really wasn't sure what to do, I came to you. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for that mentoring. Thank you. And now I'd like anybody in the room, and this is going to be a small number, maybe not any, but anybody in the room who is an attorney and uses those skills to work for justice. Are there any other attorneys here? Would you stand up or... Pauline back there too. Because attorneys can make a lot of money, but not by working for justice. And these are precious skills. Thank you. Next person, Bill Gardner. Reverend Bill Gardner, who is the person who, just a little more than 5 years ago, led a discussion about the new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, and that was what started this whole thing. It was supposed to be a one-time event, but so many people came away saying, we have to do something. You can't just read this book and then continue on with your life. As she says, once you wake up, you're awake. You can't just go back to sleep. And so Bill and I talked a lot, and many things have come from that. But Bill has also spent a career working for racial justice in one way after another. In 1968, Bill was a young minister at the Old All Souls Church, UU Church, Unitarian Universalist Church in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was an intense place to be in 1968. I don't know what he was doing before that, but I know that ever since then, Bill has been trying to figure out how he can work for racial justice in the most effective way of this time, this place, this person. And that is an amazing calling, and I am so grateful. And I want to recognize your life of work, not just the last 5 years. And I do see this movement as part of a bigger movement for racial justice, which is a very broad thing. I would like everybody who feels like you have worked in some way for racial justice, and any of the many ways, if there's something that you say, yes, I've done this, would you stand up or lift your hand? Thank you. This movement needs all of us. This society needs all of us. This work is part of the work, but it's not the only part of the work. And I really, really hope that we will get to a time when we will know so well that Black Lives Matter that we won't have to say it just like that anymore. But right now, we need to say it. So finally, I'd like members of the mass incarceration working... bag missing.
I know.
My bag was taken away.
We were prepping for you.
Chief Fred Ryan. Right here. My apologies. They took away my cue. All of them are less than $50. I knew there were legislators in the room, too. Chief Ryan, Fred Ryan, you have led a lot of work here in the Arlington Police Department to make this police department really, truly serve the community. You talk about it as being guardians of the community, and I talk about it as being guardians of the whole community. We all know, everybody in this room knows, that there are painful things that have happened around policing and the entire criminal legal system. We all know, at least I know, that our whole society doesn't deal with certain problems and then ends up asking the police to deal with them, and that can be extremely challenging. You have led our Arlington Police Department in restorative justice. You're a member of the board of the Communities for Restorative Justice. You have helped expand that program. You have led around addiction, helping people with addictions, helping their families and friends, supplying Narcan, bringing access to treatment. I remember you once telling me you'd found treatment for somebody in Philadelphia, but he didn't have money to get there, so you found a way to get him there. And it wasn't, you had to go to Philadelphia to get him treatment. It's hard to get treatment. You've done so much to lift up a compassionate, good way of taking care of everybody in our community. And to my great pleasure, you are also working beyond our community. I don't know how many times you've been to Washington, D.C., but I know it's at least twice, and I believe it's more than that. You're working statewide, you're working at the county level, at the state level, at the national level, to help change how policing is done so that people have the training they need, they have the resources they need, they know how to deal with a situation, de-escalate a situation where there's behavioral issues going on, that police have many different tools, and then they can deal with all of these situations much better. You are lifting up a better model of policing, and that is something that our society needs so badly. Thank you. And now, I'd like anybody whose paid employment is relevant to this work. Anybody who works in the criminal justice system, in policing. I know there's some police officers here because they're wearing their uniforms. But is there anybody, defense attorneys, prosecutors, anybody who works in this system and is trying to do it well, would you be willing to stand up or raise your hand? You folks are particularly important because the more I've done this work, the more I've realized that laws are important, but laws alone are not going to solve this problem because laws alone did not create it. What we need is a change in tone in our culture, which can be overly punitive, and we need to change lots and lots of policies and practices, assumptions, training. We need a lot of things to change at that nitty-gritty, daily lived level. And only people who are working in the system can do a lot of that work because you're the ones doing the work. And I know that. I know it's horrible to be doing something and then have people from outside just telling you how you can do it better or poking on your weakest spots. That can really hurt. And I also know that when you're in a system, it can be hard to change it. So the people who are working in, I'll call it the criminal legal system, but the whole broad spectrum from policing to reentry, you folks have such a call, I think. You're to do as best you can with a world that you didn't create to try to make it a little bit better. And I'm so grateful for whatever you can do to do your job in a way that suits your sense of justice and compassion. Thank you. So I'm going to ask two requests and then hand the microphone over to Rasan Hall. At the end of this all, I would like people who are honorees and still in the room, which most of them aren't, some of them aren't, to come up and we'll do a photograph together here at the front. And I'd also like people who are members of the Mass Incarceration Working Group, past or present, to come forward and we'll do a separate photo, because I would really like to have some memories of these days. And if you're a member of the Mass Incarceration Group, you may notice there are purple bags back there. Each one of you has a gift in one of those purple bags, and that's again for past and present members. There's 22 of us. So, with that, Rasan Hall, Racial Justice Director of the ACLU, doesn't need much introduction for most of you, but this is what we're talking about in terms of changing policies and practices, changing how the work is done. We're particularly focusing on district attorneys because prosecutors have such enormous impact on what actually happens. And how they do their jobs makes such a difference. So.
Thank you so much, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone. The added bonus. Thank you all. You have to excuse me fighting off a cold. But I wouldn't miss this opportunity, one, to be here to celebrate the work of this Mass Incarceration Working Group. You've done so much, and it's so important to have your voice in this struggle. So thank you for all that you have contributed to this. But then two, to spread the word about this campaign that we are involved in, and the Mass Incarceration Working Group of this body is a partner organization, as are many of the organizations in this room: EPICA, Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, NAACP, Families for Justice as Healing, the Massachusetts Bail Fund, the Criminal Justice Policy Coalition. There's a long list, but here, you know what I'm going to do so I don't forget anybody and don't nobody get mad. There's this yellow sheet of paper in the back on one of the tables. Make sure you grab this on your way out. The name of the campaign, well, let me do this first. My name is Rasan Hall. I'm the director of the Racial Justice Program for the ACLU of Massachusetts. I'd also like to acknowledge my co-laborer in this work of criminal law reform, my wife, Trinette Hall. A lot of the work that I do in the she helps keep me grounded in this work. She's a social worker, clinician working in a locked juvenile detention facility. And so she brings a wholeness and a perspective to that work, to these young boys who are in this facility. And the stories that I hear about, to the extent that she can talk about some of these things, are very compelling and talk about the need for reform. And we are also blessed to have amazing young people in our lives who come to us through our church family. And so Brittany is one of our church family children that we take and love, and we're just so proud of her and all of the amazing work that she does, and has a tremendous heart for young people. So Brittany is with us, and she's joined us today. So prior to my work at the ACLU of Massachusetts, I used to be a prosecutor. I served in Suffolk County DA's office for 8 years. And I started out in the district court in Dorchester, and then got promoted to work in Superior Court and handled gang, drug, and homicide cases. And I saw a lot in those 8 years, and I was responsible for doing a lot in those 8 years. And when I left the DA's office, I went to the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and then really got engaged in criminal law reform. And I say criminal law reform or the criminal legal system because I struggle with the use of the term justice because of the absence of justice for so many in this system. And so in doing that work, I got some greater insight beyond what my own personal experience was and beyond what the experience of family members were, about the role of prosecutor. A lot of people have read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and looks at mass incarceration and the role of the war on drugs or the war against drugs as a significant factor in contributing to the increase in mass incarceration. But there's another book that I would recommend if you haven't read it. It's called Locked In by John Pfaff. And it takes an economic analysis of the criminal legal system from beginning to end, or from many different aspects. And he identifies several things as the cause of mass incarceration. And one of those things that he specifically points out is the role of prosecutors, because over the years, prosecutors have received more and more power. They've had more and more power to charge people with offenses, greater power to increase the sentences that get recommended, and ultimately the use of mandatory minimums that they use to leverage sentences and guilty pleas out of people. District attorneys are some of the most powerful people in the criminal legal system that barely anybody knows about or talks about. And so the name of this campaign is called What a Difference a DA Makes. And every time I say that, I tell people I fight so much not to break out into song. Dinah Washington. But we need to recognize what a difference a DA makes. We did some polling because we felt, as the ACLU, we believe these things and we understand that they play a significant role, but what does the general public think about them? And so we polled, and we took a statistically significant poll of Massachusetts voters, and we found out that 4 in 10 Massachusetts voters, not residents, voters, these are people that go to the polls and vote on a regular basis, self-identified, 4 in 10 did not know that the district attorney is an elected official. This is someone that has power over charging decisions and bail requests and sentencing recommendations and what type of discovery gets turned over and whether or not they stand for or against any types of criminal law reform. And only 4 in 10 voters don't know that they are elected officials and that they are accountable only to the voters. Because we have a county governance system for the district attorneys, there's no governance structure that supervises them. But here's the thing, because people say, well, you vote for the district attorney and that's the accountability measure. In the last 20 years, 77% of DA races have been uncontested. So that's a problem if we're saying that the accountability measure is the voting public, but if the voting public does not have a choice in who is being elected to this role, then there's an absence of conversation. There is an absence of insight. And because district attorneys are overwhelmingly incumbents and because they're not called to account in the public a lot of times, the policies and practices of those offices get overlooked. And so with this campaign, one of the things that we're trying to do is raise awareness. This is a public education campaign. And so we have a website. It's www.dadifference.org. And we encourage everyone to go to the website to sign up to get alerts and information about what's going on, and also to sign up to be a volunteer. Since we launched in December, we've had over 300 people sign up to be volunteers on this campaign. And you say, well, what does the campaign do? Well, here's what the campaign does. In addition to raising awareness about what district attorneys are, we're going to have explainers and letters to the editors and op-eds and blogs and instructional videos or explainer videos about the different roles and aspects of prosecutors. We're also going to have canvassing. We're going to go out and knock on the doors of people who are self-identified as voters and tell them about what the power and the role and the influence of district attorneys is. But what's key element in this campaign is centering and prioritizing the voices and lives of those most directly impacted by the criminal legal system. And so we have set aside money to pay canvassers who are formerly incarcerated, because those are the folks who need to get out and tell their story and let people know how district attorneys' decisions and choices have impacted their lives. We're also going to host candidate forums. There are 11 there are 14 counties in Massachusetts. There are 11 district attorneys because some of those counties are combined. And out of all of 11, right now there are only 2 contested races. Here in Middlesex, the sitting DA, as I'm sure many of you all know, is Marion Ryan. She has a challenger named Donna Padalano, who's a former prosecutor, former colleague of mine from Suffolk County, but also served as a defense attorney. And then in Worcester County, there is the sitting DA is Joe Early, and I'm drawing a blank on the challenger's name. I want to say Blake Rubin, but that might not be right. That is it, Blake Rubin? Okay. And so there's a challenger there. We're hearing strong rumors about a challenger out of Suffolk County. We'll see what happens. Yeah. I guess that's a testament to what people think of the sitting DA, Dan Conley. And we're hearing some hopeful rumors about a challenger in Plymouth County, where the sitting DA is Ted Cruz. I do live in Plymouth County, and my wife and I have talked it over, and I have decided not to run for this election. But that said, there will be candidate forums to hear from the candidates about what their policy positions are. What are their training practices that they have? Where do they stand on criminal law reform? And so again, I mentioned all of the instances within the criminal legal system where DAs have power and influence that people rarely talk about, from the charging decisions. And so folks will say, well, the DAs don't have any role in charging because that's the police, right? They're the ones that go out and make the arrest and then go to court and fill out the application for complaint and submit it to the clerk. And then the clerk decides whether or not to issue the complaint. This is true. But once that comes into court, who decides whether or not it's going to go forward or not? It's the DA's office. They can dismiss those cases right at arraignment. They can divert those cases to treatment. But instead, usually what I found, what I recall from my years as a prosecutor, is we just take it. Whatever comes to us, we're not reevaluating it. And so one of the other things that's important is because most of the time when we see the district attorneys, the conversation is on the media about murders and rapes and sex trafficking and gun trafficking. And those are very significant and important cases that need to be handled. But an overwhelming majority of the cases that come through the courts are in district court, and they are low-level offenses. The Massachusetts Bail Fund, I don't know if anybody's a volunteer for the Mass Bail Fund, but essentially they are engaged in bailing people out who are held on bail under $500. And so since 2013, they've bailed out close to 1,000 people. And again, yes, that's applause worthy. And in that period of time of bailing people out who are held on bails less than $500, and again, we understand the implications and consequences of bail. If you're held, you can lose your job, you can lose your housing, you can lose custody of your children, just because sometimes you're too poor to afford bail. But in the nearly 1,000 people that they've bailed out, 49% of those cases have been dismissed. These are decisions that prosecutors are making that probably could have been made beforehand. And so this is a place where we ask, what is the role of the district attorney in those cases? The Ducan, or let me change that, the drug lab scandal. Massachusetts is home to 2 of the largest drug laboratory scandals in the history of this country. The Hinton lab and the Amherst lab. In the Hinton lab, 21,000 cases have been dismissed because of flawed or tainted evidence that was used in obtaining the convictions. And there's possibly another 8,000 that are coming from the Amherst drug laboratory. The district attorney's role is to fight for and pursue justice. In this particular case, their role that they took on themselves was to defend tainted convictions. We argued, the ACLU, along with the Committee for Public Counsel Service, argued from the outset to maintain the integrity of the system, right? No harm, no foul. Well, if there is harm, that's a foul. So and for people to believe that the system actually works, when something wrong happens, there has to be some level of accountability. Just like we have the exclusionary rules. If police illegally seize evidence, that evidence can't be used in court. That helps us believe in the integrity of the system. So if a drug laboratory taints the evidence and it is tainted, you can't use that for a conviction, and any convictions that are used, that are obtained through that tainted evidence, should be thrown out, so that we can continue to believe that the system works. But instead of agreeing with that and offering up the dismissals, they fought it for 5 years or 4 years until ultimately the court made the district attorney's office dismiss those cases. And so again, this is a role in a position of influence and power. And so lastly, well, two last things. Mandatory minimums. We talk a lot about the role of mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimums, as many of you I'm sure know, have given tremendous power to prosecutors. Myself, when I was a prosecutor, there was a young man who was charged with possession of Class D, marijuana, with intent to distribute within a certain distance of a park. He wasn't selling it, he just had a couple bags packaged like it was looking like he was going to sell it. No record, 18 years old. He brought into court, and because I was a prosecutor, we had specific instructions about what to do with school zone charges. The usual thing that we did, because every place in Suffolk County was either a school or a park, or within that distance, we would, if they had no record, we would dismiss the case, but we would only dismiss it if they agreed to the recommendation that we as prosecutors made. So for a 2-year mandatory minimum sentence, I said, I will dismiss the school zone portion if he agrees to take the sentence that I as the prosecutor recommend. And that sentence was a 2-year sentence, suspended for 2 years. So this 18-year-old man, no prior record, from all appearances seemed to be a good kid, had a 2-year House of Correction sentence hanging over his head for 2 years. I don't know what happened to that young man. I don't know if he had a probation officer that was a jerk. I don't know if he was riding along in a car with some wrong people at the wrong time and got stopped and that triggered a violation of his probation. I don't know if he successfully completed probation and went on to go to college. I have no clue. And now we are on the precipice of this emerging industry of marijuana, and the people who are going to reap the greatest benefits look nothing like that young man. And so again, that was the role and the power that I had as a prosecutor, to give him that sentence. And his mother said, yes, we'll take that, because she didn't want him to go to jail. And that's that power that I have. And so mandatory minimums are something that prosecutors use time and time again to leverage guilty pleas, because people don't want to face the lengthy sentences, the lengthy mandatory sentences that they would get if they went to trial. And then lastly, criminal law reform. It is usually the prosecutors who stand in opposition. We celebrated Senator Friedman and Senator Eldridge and Senator Brownsberger for the progressive Senate package that came out. Guess who spoke up against it? Massachusetts District Attorney Association. 9 out of the 11 said, these are the things that we oppose. Your district attorney, D.A. Ryan, did not sign on to that letter, and we applaud her for that. But here's the thing. Consensual sex between juveniles. That shouldn't be a crime. We may not want, We may not want young people to have sex at that early age, but we should not have a crime on the book that criminalizes a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old having sex together, if it is consensual. But the DA stood in opposition to that. Raising the felony threshold. Currently, if you steal anything that is over $250, that is a felony. The Senate bill proposed raising that felony threshold up to $1,500. The DAs opposed that. The DAs opposed repeal of mandatory minimums because they recognize that it is a tremendous tool for them. What they said in their statement is, we as district attorneys, every district attorney in Massachusetts opposes the use of mandatory minimums against low-level nonviolent offenders. That's what they said. I have 2 cases and then I'm going to sit down. First case is out of Essex County. There is a man who was approached by an undercover state trooper who was feigning to be dope sick. And in the substance use community, people recognize that when somebody is dope sick, usually the best thing for them, or the thing that will help them in that moment, is to provide them more drugs. And sometimes that's what people do. And so this undercover state trooper approached this guy, said, I'm dope sick, will you buy me some drugs? Feeling compassion for him, he went and purchased some drugs and gave it to the man, to the state trooper, the undercover state trooper. They arrested him and charged him with distribution of heroin. That in of itself is not a mandatory minimum. But because this man had a 19-year-old prior conviction, they charged him with distribution class A, subsequent offense, that carried a mandatory minimum sentence. That is a low-level nonviolent offender, but yet they charged that mandatory minimum. Second case, out of Suffolk County, a young man who was sitting in the passenger seat of a car, drives past a park, and is stopped by the police once they get past the park. He has drugs in his pocket that he has packaged in a way that is consistent with distribution. The police charge him with possession of a Class B substance, cocaine, with intent to distribute within 100 feet of a park. Not for selling drugs in the park, not for stopping and having that amount on him at the park, but being the passenger in a car driving past a park. Charged him with a mandatory minimum sentence. That's a low-level nonviolent offense. So we have to have a conversation about the role and the power and the influence of prosecutors. I encourage you to sign up for this website, www.dadifference.org. We're going to have a report card in the end of the summer so we can evaluate and see how the district attorneys are performing. Where do they stand on transparency? If you send a public records request to them, do they respond to it? How are they on racial justice? What do the demographics of the people they convict look like compared to the demographics of the people in their county? What do they do with civil asset forfeiture funds? Are they using that to reinvest in community prevention alternatives, or are they using that to stock up their reserves and stock up their cachet of money? These are the questions that we have, and these are the things that we are going to evaluate them on, because district attorneys have such power and influence that progressive DAs and progressive values could be held up to change the criminal legal system such that we might not even need criminal law reform if we had progressive DAs that take the stance to change and move us forward. So I welcome you to join us in this campaign. We need more volunteers. We really need to spread the word to raise the awareness. Thank you for your time and having me here.